Hitman 2-3, this is Hitman 2. What's the status? Over. 2-3, stand by. Goliath, this is 2 Bravo. Request permission to engage enemy paratroopers and attempt to snatch a grid Papa uniform 259er, 119er. Break. Enemy is unaware of our presence at this time. Over. Solid copy. Hitman 2-3, Echo 5 Foxtrot. This is Hitman 2 actual.
Hey, good evening, everybody. This is Ben Powers coming at you from the Commander's Voice. My guests tonight are George Les Jr. and Chris Langlois, both friends of the show and both descendants of Easy Company paratroopers, the illustrious band of brothers. George and Chris, good evening.
Good to see you, bud.
Hey, thanks there, Ben. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's always great to have you guys on the show. I'm very excited to have both of you guys on at once. George, you probably don't even realize this. I got to know you through Chris. Chris was one of my first guests who came on. He came on during the COVID season when we started this project. We talked about his book, how Easy Company became a band of brothers. We had a wonderful discussion about his grandfather, Doc Rowe. And he's like, hey, have you talked to Luz? And I'm like, no. He's like, you got to get together with George Les Jr. And the rest is history, because you are definitely a friend of the show here. So it's really exciting to have both you guys on. What I want to talk tonight about for everybody who's tuning in are the Easy Company reunions. Reunions are a big part of, in my experience, military culture. You get together, you form a bond with fellow soldiers, especially during a period of hardship. You tend to want to keep that going and remember the good times, commiserate over the bad times, and just check in on each other. You form friendships that kind of last for life, and you want to stay part of each other's lives. And you guys have just recently returned from a big reunion that is associated with Easy Company, and we can kind of kick off with that. So why don't you tell us what's recently happening in the world of the Easy Company reunions?
Go ahead, George Les Jr.
No, go ahead, Chris, because, man, you planned that was a super reunion. So why don't you kind of kick it off?
Well, so this year was the 75th anniversary, the 75th consecutive year that we've had an Easy Company reunion. So this is a big anniversary, a big deal. We went out to Los Angeles, of course, wanted to be close to any of the cast and the crew, and a couple of those guys were able to stop by, so that was very cool. So it was a great reunion, a great spot to be in, and a very special anniversary.
That's fantastic. And the fact that there was a 75th reunion, there's so much to unpack there, because we've just come through the variety of commemorations about the 75th anniversary of the end of the war, 75th anniversary of D-Day, 71st anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge, and now it's the 75th anniversary of the first reunion. So if you walk that back, obviously the first Easy Company reunion must have happened very soon after the war. I'm guessing 1946 if we had the 75th anniversary in 2021. So obviously the men made a concerted effort right from the get-go to stay a part of each other's lives. And it sounds like there's been a reunion every year since 1946.
Yeah, there has been. And the first reunion was in Indianapolis. And Randy Underwood had sent a picture out of that particular reunion, which is pretty neat to see. Recently, I listened to an interview by Garnier, and he was talking about at that reunion where there was a bunch of E Company guys, and Garnier got them all together and said, okay, next year, each one of you guys is making sure you're going to bring another person or two. So it continued to grow and to what it is and continues to be today.
Oh, that's absolutely amazing. And reunions have been a big part of your life, George. I remember in previous episodes, you've talked about memories of attending them as a young man, like as a child even.
Well, yeah, there's some interesting things, and like had talked about before, and 65 was in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and 68 was in Las Vegas, and 1970 was in Nashville, and then in 1981 I was older, and that was in San Diego. So yeah, it was interesting for me to go to reunions as a kid, and like I've told you before, hey, I was happy to have a pool.
Now, when you came on the show last year, Chris, I remember talking to you about, you didn't really know much about your grandfather's service, until like the miniseries came out. You said when the book came out, you saw that Pawpaw was on 2 pages. Guessed he must not have done much, and it wasn't until the miniseries came out that you realized what an integral member of the company he had been. So how did you get so involved in the reunions that now you're the coordinator?
Well, for me, it was Normandy in 2001 for the premiere, the world premiere. And so that was my first introduction to what Paw meant to the company when we showed up and we said, we're here with the real family. And they said, oh, you're going to love episode 6. It's all about your grandfather. And my first thought was, well, why would it be about my grandfather? So that started me on the trajectory of, man, I jumped in neck deep. I haven't stopped swimming since. And so that was my first introduction, and I met all these guys. I met George, the Welleses, and the Comptons, and the Garniers, and all that crew, and they've been an integral part of my life ever since. So the next 2 years reunions were in 2002, 2003. We're in Phoenix, back to back. They were great. It was real low key. The weather was great. Phoenix in October. Just had a great setting, and it just set the path for me. It's like this is where I'll be every year, with some few rare exceptions. I've been there since 2001. So.
And that's fantastic. So this is kind of your 20th anniversary when you look at it that way.
Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, really, it is. It is. It's where it all started for me.
That's really cool. Now to my, as an outsider who's, I count both of you guys as friends, but obviously this is your world, and thank you for allowing me to kind of get a peek behind the curtain. But you came in, Chris, at a time that must have been very interesting for the company, for the men. I know the book was popular, but it did not achieve the kind of popularity that the miniseries does and continues to have. So you showed up at a time where there was this explosion of interest. The men were obviously older. Some of them were no longer with you at the time, but there was still a good chunk of the original veterans. Whereas you, George, you'd been there since, you could walk. Did the miniseries have an effect on how the reunions were held and what you did at them, the level of interest in them? What was the impact of the miniseries on this very special collection of people who are trying to get together to commemorate experiences from a lifetime ago?
Well, I think one of the great things was because HBO put the series together and reconnected a lot of the guys who didn't come. It increased the size of it, and there were certain guys that, for whatever reason, weren't able to come to reunions. And they went to the reunions, they went to the world premiere and the Emmys, and then the reunions, because they reconnected with their buddies. And in some cases, it helped some of the guys who maybe suffered from battle fatigue, PTSD, during their life. But when they got back to their buddies after 65 years or 75, 55. Yeah, 55. I went to public school.
Minus 20. Don't do math in public, man.
Nobody told us there would be math in this thing.
Hey, I went to public school. But anyway.
Hold on, George, I'll get my abacus.
Okay, good. So anyway, but for some of the guys, it was really important for them to reconnect with their buddies. And that was one of the neat things that I saw. And then just the back and forth of all the men was just the coolest thing, because in my case, hey man, I wasn't Luz, but I was Luz's kid. So they kind of embraced me, and they filled the void. Hey, my dad dies in 98, and it's not like he died of this or he died of that. He gets killed, and one day I see him, and the next day I don't. He's gone. So these guys, without even really trying, filled that void that I needed of the relationships with my dad's buddies.
I understand. That's actually kind of an amazing story, because you didn't have time to prepare for that. There's kind of an analogy there between what the guys went through. One day a buddy's here, the next day he's not. You kind of had that same experience, and the company was there for you. That's really a powerful testimony, George.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, they certainly were. It's interesting. I was just out in Colorado Springs with our buddy Joey, and I didn't tell him, but I did a briefing for his buddies, and it was the night the last night I had dinner with my dad and my mom, and I said goodbye and went home. And the next day, and I did the briefing for Joey and his buddies that night. And the next day at Joey's retirement party was my dad's anniversary of passing away. So in some strange, unusual way, it really was the right place for me to be with another military soldier and his soldiers, his buddies. So kind of ironic, but it was quite fitting.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
This question's for both of you, but I'm going to tee it off with you, Chris. Yeah, you guys just had the 75th reunion in Los Angeles. It's the 20th anniversary of the premiere of the miniseries. Has there been an association between the cast and crew of the production and the descendants of the troopers? Do those folks attend reunions? Do some of them do, some of them don't? Has there been a relationship maintained?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in the first 2 years in Phoenix, several of the actors, Cudlitz and Rhimes and Matthew Settle and Richard Spate, off the top of my head, came to Phoenix. And then it kind of, they kind of took a step back. And, when you talk to these actors, they have a huge reverence. And I know a lot of the fans know that, but it's not a persona that they show to the fans. They really do. They've told me several times, listen, I've told them that, you always have an invite. You're always welcome to show up at any reunion. You don't need an invitation. And they go, you know what? But it's for them. It's for y'all. I mean, if we show up and we take away from that, and they genuinely feel that. So I think that kept them away. Not that they didn't want to be there, but really out of reverence to the men and to the family that their parents might take away from. And paparazzi the reunions, and they just don't want that. So it's really a cool thing. This year, Ross McCall showed up, Eric Bork, one of the writers, Freddie Joe Farnsworth, part of the cadre, showed up. And so, really with those guys' schedules, and who knows who's even in town at that given moment. Tom Hanks is out of town, we heard from his office. So it is what it is. Those guys have always been. They've showed up at a lot of different things, stuff that we've done with the World War II Foundation. Several of those guys have been an integral part of our lives for the last 20 years.
No, that's fantastic.
So it's very special.
That's very, very cool. Now, another thing I want to bring up, we were talking about this even before we hit record. This is the 75th anniversary. This has been done continuously since 1946. And this is another question for you, Chris. How did you guys handle it during the pandemic when folks weren't traveling and it was, everything was shut down?
Yeah, and it really goes back to 2012 was the last official reunion for the men in Kansas City. That was it. That was the last one. They said, we're not doing this anymore. And just very impromptu. Us kids said, well, that's fine, but we'll be somewhere next year in 2013. And so we've picked up that torch and run with it. 2 years ago, we were scheduled to be in San Diego. At the end of each reunion, family members vote. The reunion will be the following year. And so it was voted upon for San Diego. Tim Pincala, a nephew of Pincala, lives out that way, and he was going to help coordinate. Of course, the pandemic hit, and California shut down more than most. So we just realized we weren't going to be able to go to California. This wasn't going to work. Nothing was going to be open. It would have been a wasted trip. And so a few months in, I said, hey, let's move it to Dallas. I'm here in Dallas. Texas is definitely more open than California, and we're not going to mess this up. And there was at least one or two family members that, yeah, we'll just do next year. And I said, yeah, there's no way that these men show up in 46. Garnier shows up with 1.5 legs to the reunion in 46. And then Chris Langlois and George Luz are going to be responsible for skipping a year? No, not going to happen, man. If Garnier can show up with 1.5 legs, then the rest of us can show up with 2 legs during a pandemic. So it just wasn't going to be missed. So we had it here in Dallas. We had a great time. We had a solid showing. Some people chose not to come, which is fine. But those of us who showed up, we had a great time. And there was was no way that that streak was going to end my watch.
That's amazing. That just adds to the kind of the rich tapestry of all the different history you guys have put together. I think that is really, really amazing. So going back in history a little bit, George, speaking of that rich tapestry, I know you had a couple stories of reunions that you had wanted to share, just different memories that have popped up over the years. Is there anything in particular?
Well, there's several things that my dad, the reunions were the reunions, and then throughout the course of the year, there was a lot of correspondence back and forth from this guy to that guy, or whatever it was. There was just quite a bit of that. So one of the guys who was kind of a prolific writer was Bob Rader. And we've got a picture that we'll put up on the screen afterwards. And it was Rader standing at one of the stables in Elborn. And like I said, Rader was kind of a prolific writer, and he talks about the reunions, and I got a little piece here. So it says the reunions are becoming increasingly harder to attend. Now the aches and pains are manifesting themselves in all of these old, abused, beat up bodies. It's funny, a lot of these old troopers suck up that gut only at reunion time, their wives say, and they go around the house and gravity takes over until a few days before the reunion, and they start their basic training all over again. Suck it up, Mr. Stand Tall. And it's on its way, and it's on their way home from one of these reunions. They all say, never again. I can't suck it up anymore. This is a cue for the wife to start preparing for next year's reunion. Only death could keep these old farts from getting together again. And that's the way most of them felt. They were going to get there unless they were dead. And so that's the cool thing. And in this picture here with Bob Rader in Elborn, you'll see him, he's at one of the stables. And I believe that is the stable that was taken apart piece by piece and put back in Toccoa at the museum.
Oh, that is cool. That is really amazing. Great story, George. Thank you for sharing that.
And those stories are just kind of endless stories. You know, with all of the paperwork and things like that. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, Paul Clifford, great guy. So we were just talking about some of the Screwball stories. And I remember one of the ones in Las Vegas in 1968. I was 12 years old. I did that without a calculator. I was 12 years old in 1968. So, you know, my dad would give me a couple of bucks each day, and he would say, okay, make sure you eat. Because, you know, when you're in Vegas, you know, there's a lot going on. So I guess I was 12, I could handle myself. Or he just told my sister, make sure, keep your eye on your brother. So, anyway, so we were just doing this and that. And I think our parents were out on one of the big events that they had that evening at the Stardust Hotel. And so my sister says, okay, come with us. So it's my sister, who I was 12, and I think she was like either 15 or 16. And then there were the Rainey girls, and I think they were a little bit older. But we ended up in some off the street bar, nightclub. Now, I don't know how they got a 12-year-old in, you know.
You must look very mature for your age, George.
Well, I was pretty small as it is. I didn't start growing until I was like in high school. And I was a senior, but I always remember that story. And I really would like to connect with the older Rainey girls on how they came up with this plan, and how the rules in Las Vegas, I guess there are no rules. You know, when you let a bunch of girls in, you know, half of them are underage, and with some the little boy that came in, what's that kid? Gave him a soda and, you know, put him over in the side, you know, sit down and shut up, kid. But so anyway, that was one of the comical stories. But at the end of it all, you know, my dad, he would give me money every day to make sure I bought food and stuff. And back in the day, for $5, you could eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner in Las Vegas. Wow. And but I pretty much went to the kiosk every day, and I think I ate every Nestle's Crunch Bar they had. So I was on a Nestle's Crunch Bar binge, but anyway, you know, and the reunions went on, and you could see the value of these reunions. And And one other thing I'd like to just say too is the reasons these reunions were successful was because the wives bought in on these things. And if it wasn't for the wives, these things wouldn't have continued the way they did. I know in the case of my mom, and I'm sure a lot of other moms knew that for their husband's well-being and staying connected with their buddies, this is what we're going to do. So the wives all developed quite a friendship themselves.
That's awesome. And
You know?
has that trickled down to your extended families as well, with the families of the descendants?
Yeah, I would say so. You know, we've got a nice group, and Chris has done a masterful job. Chris and Mary Ann and Tracy Compton. You know, just kind of working the behind the scenes stuff and keeping things together. And so we're looking forward to 2022.
That's awesome. And that's a great segue for my final question before we wrap up. So obviously there was a vote at the end of the reunion. Where's 2022 going to be? Or are you guys not willing to share that?
No, I think it's no, it's going to be at Benny. So I thought it would be.
Oh, wow.
That was my proposal to go to Benny. You know, we've been to Campbell. We've been to. I don't think we've done one at Toccoa, but to go to Benny and see those. If we can swing it, it'll be another one of those things where you get to walk in the footsteps. Right, those towers, 3 of the 4 are still standing. So I mean, you're walking where our fathers and grandfathers walked, and so I think that'd be a really cool.
That's amazing. What
Yeah, I think
great choice, Chris. I'm really excited for you guys. That
yeah,
sounds
I'm
awesome.
excited too. That's gonna be cool.
So I just, once again, thank you, gentlemen, Chris, George. Like I love to introduce you guys as friends of the show. I'm honored to know y'all. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. You know, folks, you've been tuning into the Commander's Voice. We've been talking with Chris Langlois, George Les Jr. about the meeting and reunions to the descendants of the Men at Easy Company. So thank you very much for coming out tonight, gentlemen.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ben.
All right, y'all take care. Bye-bye.